Good morning, and welcome to another week of Journey with Christ. I'm your host, Mark Mitchell, a preaching minister here at the Park Avenue Church of Christ in Charleston, West Virginia. So glad you have tuned in. And I'm joined, as always, by Steve Fox, our expert and a minister for 50 years. How you doing there, buddy?
Oh, I'm doing fine, except I'm not much of an expert because I can't find this chapter. It's in here somewhere. And I do want to do a little house cleaning before we start our general topic. A couple weeks ago, I mentioned a book that I had read in the 70s. And it was called Situation Ethics.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting book. I didn't agree with about half of it, but it made you think and made you look in other directions that maybe you hadn't looked in. But I said his name was John Fletcher. I looked at my book again in my library. His name was Joseph Fletcher, so I apologize to Joseph and to his family. And I also would ask that you please not tell Susie I made a mistake, because that would just ruin the idealism. So,
for who? Her or you?
Yeah, for her. Because
hey, I hate to tell you this. She already knows.
Oh, she already knows. Well, we used to have a little competition when we first got married because she said I had a hard time saying I was. See, I can't even say it now. I was. We worked on that.
Well, you know, wrong and right begin the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Just trick yourself.
I can't remember who it was. Some girl told me I was always looking for Mr. Right, but I didn't know he was Mr. Always Right. So that's one thing I wanted to mention before we start our class. The other thing I wanted to mention was I heard a pretty decent sermon yesterday morning, and the minister right in the middle of his sermon said, "You know, most of you won't even like this." And I thought, well, that's a weird thing to say. And then the more I listened to him, the more sense he made. And on the way home, Susie and I started talking. I always think the best sermons are the ones that make you talk on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're sitting at the table on Sunday afternoon. What did he talk about?
Yeah.
Those are the best sermons.
Well,
the ones
I wanted to. I was pretty apprehensive about giving that sermon.
Yeah.
Well,
you were probably apprehensive because of human nature.
Yeah.
For those of
people
you,
don't like
for those
to hear
of you
this.
who weren't there, and those of you who fell asleep and weren't listening, Mark talked about responsibility, and Susie and I on the way home talked about. We said to each other, how many problems in this world would be solved if people would
just speak up,
be responsible for what they did,
and speak up to those who are being irresponsible.
Yeah, and you look at the wars we're in all over the planet, the gun lobby.
There's not a facet of our world that doesn't need a little kick in the seat.
That's right.
Over their irresponsible behavior.
I watch those people knocking in windows at stores, and well, I didn't do that. Somebody else did that. As a matter of fact, if I did it, I don't have responsibility for it because I'm allowed to do that.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that is absolutely understood when you look at it from everything that Jesus teaches, that if we all acted responsibly, there would be no need for justice systems. Mm-hmm. There would be no need for courts. Everything would work.
Yeah.
If we would do what we're supposed to do.
So I would suggest, after listening to the sermon, I would suggest that all of us make a more intense effort to accept our own responsibility, because if we do that one-on-one, or even in very small things, you know, who spilled that milk? It wasn't me. So if we start with small things and work our way up, maybe we'll get to a point where Russia doesn't feel like she has to go after the Ukraine.
What was it Dad always used to say? Yard by yard, it's hard. Inch by inch, it's a cinch.
Man. Is that in the proverb?
I don't know. Probably, but not exactly hillbilly version.
We were raised in similar households, because my grandpa always used to say, Well, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen whether it happens or not. And you can't argue with it. The other thing you can't argue with is, well, it is what it is. I don't care how dumb you are or how ignorant you are about something that you say. If you say it is what it is, nobody can challenge that.
Well, the worst part about it is, especially in the moment, that it is what it is.
Mm-hmm. That's right. You can't be wrong.
All right, we need to move on. We've spent...
Oh, no, I was done. That's what we were going to discuss today.
All right. Well, go ahead and introduce us to our topic this week.
We will introduce you to the topic for this week. We have studied in the last couple of weeks things that were marvelous in the Scriptures that Jesus he was the one who walked around doing the teaching and doing the actions, and people marveled at him, or they marveled at his teaching.
From all the things you picked out, we have varying reactions. Some of them, in fact, last week, his own family called him crazy. No, he was beside himself.
The real Bible says he was beside himself, which doesn't sound very, that doesn't sound harming at all. Mom, he said I was beside myself. Now, there's a little bit difference between that and, hey, Mom, he's out of his mind.
He's out of his mind.
Yeah. And that goes back to how people do respond one way or the other.
Yes.
What we're going to study this morning is, what does it mean to be amazed, or what does it mean to be astonished? Because some of the people in the crowd, when they heard Jesus or when they saw him perform a miracle, the Bible says they were amazed or they were astonished. So we're going to start with, I'm going to put you on the spot, okay?
All right.
Tell the class some things that in your life when you were amazed.
Oh. I was amazed of the difference my life was after children came in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was one of those baseball bats in the head kind of moment. I've been amazed, I guess, at events that I've seen throughout, some of them sporting events. I was amazed.
Like Jack Buck saying, "I don't believe what I just saw."
Yeah. I mean, I remember a night Michael Jordan was playing basketball, and he just about made everything. It was one of those nights.
That was against the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah, it might have been. I
never did like him.
But I've had a few moments. I've been amazed several times in moments of worship, through study and spirit. I mean, there's been something that, as you and I've talked about privately several times, there's sometimes words just jump out of this Bible that you're just sitting there. I mean, I'm sitting there crying because I'm overwhelmed and amazed at how powerful these words can be at just the right moment.
And it's almost like God keeps putting new verses in the Bible.
And I find them.
Yeah, we either jump over them or there's another
we skim
time.
over them or find them.
Yeah. Well, can you think of anything else that was? It's amazing that Kelly decided to marry you. I don't know how that's pretty amazing.
Well, that's other people's amazing.
Oh yes, that's not her.
I'm not surprised.
That's not her. Matter of fact, you had to get rid of your other 5 girlfriends before she accepted. I never had that.
That's not true.
That's not true, and we will correct that in next week's session. I wrote a couple things down that, and babies are, when you have a baby that's born, nothing like it. I don't think you can top it.
I don't either.
And I wrote a couple other things that I'm always amazed. I was a young adult before I saw the ocean. I was probably 33, 34 before I ever saw the Atlantic or any ocean.
Really? That was amazing for you.
Just stand there and watch it reminded me in another way of something else that has amazed me 3 times, because I've been there 3 times at Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
I could stand there and watch that water for the rest of my life.
Grand Canyon.
And wouldn't get bored. I wrote that down. But you know, I'll tell you how I saw the Grand Canyon. I've seen it twice. We were flying to Los Angeles.
I was getting ready to say one of them was over there.
and our pilot says, if you look out to the right, you see the Grand Canyon. Well, we're past that. Okay, and then when we came back, we did the same thing. If you look out to your left, you'll see the Grand Canyon. So I've just, 5 seconds or 10 seconds of the Grand Canyon, that's what I've seen.
But still, yeah, it's a pretty amazing thing to see.
But Niagara Falls, from a physical standpoint of just the world and creation, I think Niagara Falls is the most beautiful thing there is in our hemisphere. Something else that amazes me every 4 years, I watch the Olympics. And I can't believe that men and women are that fast or can jump that high or can play basketball like that. I watch the Olympics and I am absolutely amazed and astonished at what they do. And I wrote another thing down that really amazes me too. Magic. When somebody's really, really good at it.
The illusion of it.
You have to have, somebody taught me this a long time ago and I'm still working on it. There's one rule of magic. You have to be the smartest guy in the room. Because if you're not, they're going to start whispering, this is how I did that, that's how I did that. Oh, did you see that? Did you see his hand? Did you see what? You got to be the smartest guy in the room to make it work. But man, when there's guys on TV or Penn and Teller, or, when they do stuff like that, it's absolutely, to me, it's amazing. And you got 2 kinds of people in the world. You got one who says, that's the dumbest thing I ever saw in my life. Or another one who says, you teach me how to do that? So there's all kinds of things in God's world that we have advantage of, that we look at sometimes on a daily basis, about being astonished or about being amazed. Now the question we want to not propose, the question we want to pose to our audience this morning is, what did these people look at and how did they respond to Jesus during different situations? The first one Mark's going to read for us is Mark chapter 2, 13 through 17.
All right. Once again, Jesus went out beside the lake. A large crowd came to him, and he began to teach them. And as he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," Jesus told him. And Levi got up and followed him. And while Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were eating with him and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. And when the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with the sinners and tax collectors, they asked the disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said to them, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." If you could summarize that paragraph that you just read in one sentence, what is Mark telling us about astonishment and amazement? Who's astonished in this passage? The Pharisees. Yeah. Now, when you hear the word astonished, and probably in truth, probably the sinners and tax collectors. Yeah. A prophet is talking to them. As far as they're concerned, a prophet is talking to them, because all other prophets would have scolded them rather nicely to that group. Well, shoot, if you're having dinner with someone in their society, you're accepted. Usually we use the term amazement from a positive standpoint. I'm amazed at Niagara Falls. Yeah. You don't say, well, I guess you could, I'm amazed at how many people are killed in Africa every year. Or I'm amazed how stupid some people are. And that wasn't directed towards you. Well, it couldn't have been more directed towards me. No,
That-
I'm thinking about the Pharisees and them.
Well, just because of that, I'm not eating with you anymore. We'll see how you feel. Mark chapter 2, Mark tells us about this occasion where Jesus eats with... What's the big deal about eating with somebody? Why were they upset that Jesus was eating with sinners?
Because in their culture, eating with someone was an acceptance of equality. It meant that you and I are equal, and that we approve of one another. And by Jesus doing so, of course, that was the biggest problem the Pharisees had, because they knew if they ate with them, they would approve them. It happens even in our culture today. We don't treat it as eating, but let's say we go worship in somebody else's building. To many believers and followers, that means you approve of them and accept them. And some people look at that like, well, you can't go to that place because they might think by you being there that they're approved.
Yeah. It's such a fine line between how do I deal with people. I wrote down a word that we're going to talk about later. Nobodies.
Yeah.
How do you treat nobodies? How do you treat people who are homeless? How do you treat people who are in a wheelchair? How do you treat people who have a different color skin than you have?
Or even just a different opinion.
Well, that's not true. You want to prove that?
I do every day.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'm just going to not come over anymore if you're going to
No, I'm going to.
take my words and throw them out the window.
No, I'm going to.
You're going to help me, aren't you, Mark?
Well, no, I'm not. It's not my job to. God didn't put me in charge to be the approval person.
That's good.
It is. It is.
Right back at you.
Because I'm amazed to what extent Jesus will accept us. He always accepts us where we are, and then works with us from there.
And that's something that these people didn't understand.
They didn't get that.
They didn't get that at all. So maybe we can understand a little bit better than they did.
Yeah.
So he reclines at table. By the way, if you want to do a really, really interesting homework project, go through Mark and Luke and circle the verses that say something about at table. Jesus was always at table. He was always eating with people. He was always eating with people that other people didn't like. So when he shows that he's accepting these people, like you said a minute ago, if I invite you to my house to eat supper and we sit down and eat supper together, I'm saying to you, you're my equal.
Yeah. And there's nothing, we are compatible.
Yeah. And these people had certain definitions and certain borders. You can't go past this border, you can't go past that border, you can't accept this person. So in some cases, the Sadducees and Pharisees just threw everybody out the window.
That's right. Well, I'm not even sure the Pharisees and Sadducees would have even eaten together.
They probably wouldn't have.
No.
So he's reclining at table in his house. This is Matthew's house. Well, some translations say Levi. And many of the tax collectors, I love this phrase, tax gatherers and sinners.
Yeah. I thought they were the same.
I'm not a sinner, I'm a tax collector.
Actually, they would prefer to be called sinners instead of tax collectors.
Yes, they would. I always feel sorry for people who are always taking other people's money and in a legal way.
Well, look at the turmoil right now over the news over the fact that they're hiring 87,000 new IRS agents, new tax collectors.
Yeah.
Ain't nobody happy.
I'll pay for that. So the scribes and the Pharisees and some other people, religious leaders, he ate with sinners and tax collectors, and they said, why is he eating and drinking with tax collectors and sinners? They even made a distinction between, here's a group of people who are immoral because they're working for the Roman government, but over here is a group of people that we'll just call sinners.
Mm-hmm.
That's not us.
Yeah.
It's not our group, but that's what they are. So if we can figure that, if we know that that's what that means when he sits down at table with somebody, how come he couldn't figure it out? How come he couldn't say, no, I'm sorry, can't do that?
Well, it's sort of like the moment that, I haven't looked as far in advance to know whether you've got this story in there, but where the man says, well, this guy can't be a prophet because he's letting a harlot touch him.
Taking her hair.
Yeah, wiping it on his feet.
And wiping it on his feet. Man. Jesus' answer to that scenario and the one we're looking at here, Jesus' answer to that is, the reason I do that is because I've come to heal the sick.
Yeah.
I didn't come to call well people or righteous people. I came to heal the sick, and you can call them sinners if you want to, but that's all of you.
Yeah.
It's probably the most sarcastic thing Jesus ever said. He says, I came to heal Pharisees and sinners. Of course, you're not sinners.
Yeah.
You know, I know you're not in that category, and you know you're not in that category either. But you got to look at it in a different way. I came into the world to heal people who needed healed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all of you.
You know, that is the one thing that maybe as humans we need to get, that our condition of sinners is actually reveals how sick we are as humans. That we don't, if you, as the old saying goes, you eat garbage, you become garbage. And if you take in garbage all your life, you can't help but spew the garbage. I mean, Jesus was one of his greatest principles. You know, it's not eating the food that makes you bad. It's the garbage that's already in there. The ideas that you have in your mind of right and wrong, and good and bad, and Jesus is turning this understanding upside down, because they were law watchers. They were looking for people who did wrong law things. And Jesus telling him, that condition is not the problem. I mean, people are going to make mistakes. I'm going to miss the mark as far as law parts are concerned. But what I can't miss the mark on is, where is my heart directed? How am I seeing God and everyone else?
Yeah. And that's not an easy thing to do.
It's not a full-time job thing.
I don't think that any of us realize as we're growing up how much we really miss that. Now, if you're lucky you grew up in a neighborhood or in a church where you didn't have any trouble with that. If somebody was black, if somebody was Hispanic, if somebody was in a wheelchair, if somebody, and this is 6 or 7 years ago, the first Sunday I was sitting with Susie at church here when we came over here, and I started looking around. I knew half of the people that would go to church here, and I whispered to Susie, or maybe I think I wrote it as a note and handed it to her. I said, do you know that there are 9 people in this church who've been to prison? And I didn't write that in a demeaning way. I was proud of a church that would have 9 people who've been to prison, or 5 divorced couples. Put whatever you want to in a blank. When they walk in a room, you have to decide, are these people with us? Are these people a part of our environment? Are we going to allow them to come to church where we go to church? Because that's accepting, just like eating with each other.
It's getting around the table together and saying, hey, we're one.
That's right.
We're one.
And we know backgrounds, and we know things that have happened. We've known things that happened in our own life.
Yeah.
But
Jesus said to the crowd, one without sin, pick up the first stone.
Yeah.
Well, nobody can pick up that stone.
Nope, they can't.
None of us are perfect. I mean, none of us are without sin.
Mark is going to read for us a parallel passage in Luke 15. Luke 15, 1 and 2.
And you're right. It's almost identical.
Yes.
Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them."
Oh.
Can you imagine when the Pharisees went home? And they're reclined around the table of their family and those who they approve of. And they're eating with them, and they start telling the story of, "You won't believe this prophet who claims to be sent from God. He eats with tax collectors and sinners." And the tone and mutter.
He's not very cautious about who he eats with. That's not the word I'm looking for, but that's what I'm...
Selective.
Yes, he's much more selective than any of the rest of us, because we know that there's certain groups.
He picks out the exact person we probably wouldn't eat with.
He puts his arms around him and pulls him into the group when we're trying to build a fence around him and saying, you can't be in our kingdom.
Keep out.
Yeah. That's not easy, especially if you grew up in an environment where your parents taught you that or your grandparents taught you that.
What was the old saying?
You have to relearn some things.
Bad morals corrupt. What was it?
Good company.
Yeah, bad company corrupts good morals.
Something like that.
Yeah.
If you'd get a real Bible, you could quote that.
It's actually not in there.
15, 1 and 2 is a fantastic verse, because these sinners and tax collectors were coming near him to listen to him. They want to know what's going on here. There's something different here. This is not your average Joe standing up behind a pulpit or behind a rock or behind a tree and talking to the masses. This is somebody who you are so fascinated with him, you can't get away from him. Now, you may decide that he's crazy or he's out of his mind, but you can't get away from that. You can't just walk away. There has to be something that's going on in your mind. Is this man who he said he was? In chapter 15, verses 1 and 2, Luke makes almost an exact parallel to what Mark told us happened in the previous book. They begin to grumble. The scribes begin to say, "This man receives sinners and he eats with them." There's again the idea that if I invite you into my home, I'm on an equal basis with you, or you vice versa. And he told them this parable. 15, 1 and 2. The instructions were, what's he doing wrong? And the answer is, he receives other people. He eats with other people. There are those who are outsiders. I wrote some words down that I think would describe these two verses. There are those who are outsiders. There are those who are outcasts. And I love this word because we don't use it very often, but we sure know what we're talking about when we do use it. There are nobodies.
Yep.
Okay, that guy's homeless. He's a nobody. He shouldn't be coming into our church. That woman has been divorced a couple times. That guy's been in prison a couple times. They are nobodies. They're in a situation where they're really going to have to try hard to jump over a higher fence because everybody on the other side of the fence doesn't want them over there.
Well, you know, the sad part about it is, Steve, we now live in a society where people who don't agree with our views become nobodies too. Mm-hmm. We now have a culture
that's never happened in the church, though.
No. We love everybody, even people.
Everybody.
We fellowship those who agree with everything that I agree with. So, you know. But we also, we today, as I heard one news commentator and journalist who proposed this past week that honestly he thinks we're at the closest point that we've been since the Civil War to be in Civil War.
Yeah. Oh, that wouldn't surprise me at all. Thank you. You got enough people who are armed who have decided I am so right that with my gun I have the right to go out and find people that are wrong and take care of them.
Yeah.
And when people are not responsible for that, you got all kinds of problems in your environment.
Well, we look at people, we have in our makeup, and this is a serious human condition that is from Satan, and it's not from God, because God, by Jesus here, has taught us a whole new rule. There are no nobodies. But oftentimes, we rationalize that nobodies don't deserve anything, and thereby we can do whatever we want to them.
Do you know, I think I just thought about this just now. I may have to go back and reevaluate my statement. I think the biggest nobody in the New Testament was a thief on the cross. He didn't have anything to offer anybody.
We already knew he was. I mean, you're not just presumed guilty when you're put on a cross. Of course, with Jesus, it was a trumped up case, but you're right. In fact, he openly admits, hey, we're getting what we deserve.
I wrote down some things we do with nobodies. And the whole basis of this, whatever you want to call it, environment is somebody's different than I am. And that gives me the right to keep you at arm's length.
Yeah.
To make sure that you stay away from me, because I don't want to be affected by whatever it is that you have.
Yeah. I don't want anything you got rub off on me.
That's true. And it's pretty contagious. We do that with people that have a lot of money. Susie worked for 6 years for the governor's wife, and I spent a lot of time at the governor's mansion with her for assignments that she had to carry out. I'm not a tuxedo. I think I just made up a new word. I'm not a tuxedo
You're not even
guy.
comfortable saying the word,
No,
much less wearing it.
I don't want to put it on, and I don't want to say it anymore. Let me give it a third shot. Tuxedo. I'm not a tuxedo and tie kind of guy. I walk into one of those places, where there's 100 people, 150 people, and every guy has on a tux, and every woman has on, a $500 dress that they bought yesterday.
But, on the flip side of it, Steve, you're not a coveralls kind of guy either. I mean, you don't have your bibs on.
I don't have those on, but you put me in a pair of cargo pants and a t-shirt.
Pair of sandals?
No, I don't wear sandals.
Give me my running shoes.
Yes, take my running shoes, because I got a bunch of those. But I have to decide then, how do I act in that environment?
Yeah.
I'm much more comfortable in an environment in Managua, Nicaragua, in the middle of a neighborhood where people live in houses that are made out of cardboard and plywood, stuff like that.
Yes.
But I still have an obligation to be, whichever situation I'm in, I still have an obligation to say, there's nothing wrong with these people just because they're different than I am.
What was it Paul said? I've learned to be content no matter where I am.
No matter what state he was in.
Yeah. And that's not
I
just...
think he was talking about West Virginia. I don't know.
Well, you and I both
Could have
know.
been Kentucky.
Well, you can put any state of existence you're in. Paul had learned to become content in it. And Jesus is demonstrating that he was content. He didn't care what anybody said except God the Father. Yeah. That's who he cared about pleasing. He wasn't worried about pleasing the powerful people in Jerusalem, and he wasn't worried about upsetting those whose feelings was always hurt. I mean, he wanted to be accepting of all people, and you put up the boundary, not him.
Yeah.
Well, we're almost at the end.
We're almost. Let's look at a couple more things. We do that with people that have money. Mm-hmm. We do that with people who are poor, who live in poverty. I don't want to be infected by whatever disease they have. And I even know I've read about. I've never met these people, but people in Central America who are part of a certain tribe believe very strongly that you're not allowed to help poor people because God is punishing them for something they did in a past life. And if you help them, that means you're making their life better when God is punishing them and doesn't want their lives to be better. So we do that with people with money. We do that with people who have power. I'm not a power kind of guy either, and I can say that easier than I said tuxedo. We do that with people who have celebrity status. Oh, we do that all the time. We do that with people who have social status. Well, they're different than I am, or they're not as far up the ladder as we are. Basically, if you summarized it, Jesus was saying to these people, look, just because you think those other people are not good enough, that doesn't mean that's right, that's correct. You need to look at that again. People who have been in prison, people who are divorced, people who are of a different color. Jesus is saying in both of these passages, you're going to have a little more patience with the people that you disagree with or are different than you are. And we make what I'm always amazed with is we make those decisions in a snap. Somebody walks in a room, well,
I'm starting calibrating right now.
Yeah. What's the first thing? What's the first thing you look at when somebody walks in a room?
Well,
what's the one thing?
Skin color.
No, even before that.
Male or female?
Male or female.
Yeah.
You say male or female. Bang. Okay, that's off. That's on. That's off. Skin color. Age.
Young or old?
Are they young or are they old? Are they crippled or are they not crippled? Are they in a wheelchair or not in a wheelchair? Do they have to?
Are they going to take up some of my time, or is this going to be easy?
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, for me I do good till I get about right there. Okay, is this going to be 5 minutes or 30 minutes?
Well, I think God tries to teach us, and that's what He's doing through Jesus' ministry here. You knock down those obstacles and those hurdles, so you don't have to treat people like that.
Yeah.
All of us have been in situations where we were on the other side of the coin and we got treated like that. It doesn't feel very good.
No, because as I tell my wife all the time, I remind her that our eyes and our body language tell a story, whether we want it told or not. Because immediately people will know whether you're interested or not.
There's a passage in the New Testament that Paul wrote where he talks about what kind of wisdom we're supposed to use. I really, really like Andy Stanley. He wrote a book called The World's Greatest Question, and I'll save you a few hours. You don't have to read it. The basis of his book is you always say to yourself, what would a wise man do?
Yeah.
In every situation, every decision. Marriage, job, church, doesn't make any difference. You ask yourself, what would a wise man do? And you'd save a whole lot of trouble in your life if you ask that question all the time.
Yeah, if every decision and every word that we spoke went through that particular filter, and keeping in mind that every decision and every word you say will come back to you in some form of fruit, because the seed you just sowed will return. You're
either going to feel good about
what you've done or said, or
distances,
or you're not.
Or what's my life going to be like 5 years down the road if I'm not a wise man?
That's right.
What else do I have written down here that's highly significant? Oh,
I think we're at that moment.
We're at where I have to say something.
No, you're going to have to save it for next week.
We are. There are two other passages we need to look at.
But actually, this is sort of like your hinge point for the other two passages.
I don't think I've ever made a hinge point.
Well, it sure seemed like one to me when I looked at the scriptures. So, but we have set a foundation here for us. That what Jesus is saying is, people matter. Whether they're like you or not, they matter.
Our assignment for this week will be pick out some people that maybe you would have a hard time being around or being in their presence or riding in the same car or going to the same restaurant. Pick some people that you normally would not feel that way about, and remember what Jesus said about physicians. He was a physician who came into the world to heal people.
That's right.
And the only way we can start healing people is when we pull them into our own environment and say, you're a part of me, I'm a part of you.
We're together.
Yes, we're together.
What was it, that saying that became real popular during the beginning of the COVID? We're all in this together. Yeah, we need to remember that, don't we?
That's true.
Well, on behalf of Steve and I, we thank you so much for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. I hope you were blessed by participating with us today.
And I promise, next week, nobody has to wear a tuxedo.
Or say the word.